Okay, so welcome again, guys, on a yet again another topic for this week, which is basically understanding the REITs and the InvITs sector, which actually is a very new asset class in India. Um, as you guys might be knowing, obviously the full form of REIT and InvIT, Real Estate Investment Trust and Infrastructure Investment Trust. What are these asset classes? Why are they new? Why did it take so much of time for the Indian regulations to adopt this asset class? Because the first country to come up with a REIT offering was US in the 1960s. So basically, it took India more than 50 years, almost 60 years to adopt this asset class. And why did it take so much of time? A little bit of background about myself initially. I mean, obviously, you guys might be knowing what I have been doing and all, but let me just correlate it to what I've done in the REIT sector so that you get a perspective as to how I am coming to this topic from the Indian point of view and from the global point of view. So I started my career with Deutsche Bank in 2014, and there it was like I was aligned to Australian real estate sector. So I'd spent a considerable time in Sydney as well, and I was kind of doing a lot of transactions, a lot of M&A and IPO transactions in the Australian REIT sector. And it was basically that time in 2014 when I just passed out from IIM Indore and joined Deutsche. REIT was unheard about. Like nobody knew about what REIT is. Uh, I had heard about what REIT on the full form is because it was somewhere mentioned in CFA level 1 and level 2 books, but then nothing more than that. Because, those who have been studying CFA, any kind of level, so, there are 10 chapters. And in one of the very, very, 10, basically, 10 different groups are there. And in alternate assets, in one of the small chapters, small paragraphs, there was mentioned that, okay, there is something called REITs. So didn't really bother to understand what it was. But then when I was anyways into this sector, into a completely new geography, so it was a challenge. It was a challenge to understand a new geography, and then it was a challenge to understand what this kind of a new sector is. But when I studied more about it, it felt so interesting that why not this is in India. Then I really started looking at if there has some considerable work has been done in India for REIT sector. So I got to know that in 2007 around, probably the first regulations were written about SEBI actually recognizing this, but nothing happened. Then in 2014, when the new government came in, I thought that okay, now probably some work, because there were some talks that okay, now things are moving in that direction. I thought it might be that it will not take much time for India to actually start adopting this. But then I was anyways continuing in Sydney and studying the REIT sector over there, and got to know about US as well, about European, Japan, Singapore. All these countries have had REITs since years and years, many I mean even decades. So even Pakistan had it at that point of time. So I thought okay, not much time when India also starts adopting it. By the time in 2016 second half that I left Australian real estate sector and came back to the India team, and in India I did not join as a pure play REIT specialist, but then I joined as an ECM banker, which I explained you in one of the previous sessions what an equity capital markets guy does at investment banking. But then by the time I was finishing up with my stint at Deutsche and was about to join Edelweiss in September 2018, my last assignment at Deutsche was to work on the DRHP of Embassy Blackstone REIT. So I had worked considerably on pitching to Embassy and the Embassy group that okay, the merchant bankers keep pitching as to why you should be hired as an investment banker. So I had started working a little bit on the REIT sector, first REIT offering in India, but could never see the light as I was not. For me, I had already moved to Edelweiss by the time the first REIT listing in India happened in March 2019. Since then, there have been three REIT listed in India: Mindspace REIT, your Blackstone Embassy REIT, and the third one, Mrinal, which is the third one?
Brookfield REIT.
Brookfield REIT. Brookfield REIT was the latest, which happened last year, right? And then on the other hand, there are InvITs as well. So there are three InvITs: India Grid InvIT, which is the Sterlite InvIT. Then recently there is a Power Grid InvIT, which has been which is the IPO of which has been launched, and the third one, which was probably the earliest one, was IRB.
IRB, the first one in India.
The first one in India was IRB InvIT. So what happens basically? What is the difference between REIT and InvIT is that behind REIT, the underlying is real estate, and behind InvIT, the underlying is infrastructure. In real estate, there can be a lot of things, right? Real estate can be your office spaces, real estate can be your industrial spaces, it can be your malls and all, it can be your residential as well, it can be your educational universities, lot of things are there. So it can be, sub-classified into different kind of segments. Similarly, for the InvIT, infrastructure can be roadways, can be the transmission lines, or the solar energy. I mean, lot of these kind of things can be covered, which Mrinal will anyways cover in his talk. So I would say that not all InvITs are the same, not all REITs are the same. You need to evaluate all the REITs, all the InvITs differently, depending upon which subclass it is, kind of belonging to before getting to investment. But let me just cover these things from the perspective of the asset allocation, because that's my forte. And then how this kind of fits into the picture will be covered by our expert Mrinal today. So till now, what happened was that, okay, SEBI said new asset class. I don't think so retail investors will understand this, can't take that risk. It will be only offered to the institutional investors who have that kind of a research capabilities, who can understand the sector better. So not for retail investors. And when they say not for retail investors, the only solution was what they have is increase the ticket size, the minimum ticket size, to so high that retail investors will say ki bas jane do, mere liye to hai hi nahi. Right. So initially it was mainly the institutional investors, and when you say institutional investors, obviously they include the HNIs as well, because HNIs have a lot of money. They don't mind putting in a lakh or 2 lakh or a 5 lakh ticket size in these kind of asset classes. And gradually they thought that, okay, once the liquidity will increase, people will understand the asset class more. Probably once in the future, we will start opening this to the retail investors. Now, what happened was that when the first IPO came, Embassy REIT IPO came, the minimum ticket size generally for the IPO is how much? 15,000 rupees, right? So you can apply to these IPOs which are coming these days. So many IPOs, it's the minimum ticket size is 15 lakh. And if you are a retail investor, you can put in a minimum lot of 13, because 2 lakh rupees, below 2 lakh, you are called a retail investor. What they did in these IPOs was the minimum ticket size they kept was 2,40,000. Mrinal, right? 2,40,000 was the minimum.
2,20,000.
2,20,000. But okay, 2,20,000 was the minimum. So the offer price at Embassy was 300. So basically, depending upon that kind of a thing, the lot size, the lot size was decided. And once that was listed, it was I think 1,20,000 was the minimum where you can transact. So you can't buy one. Sorry.
1,10,000 to be precise.
1,10,000. So you can't buy just one unit out of it, right? आज एक share का mood आया, Reliance का share खरीदना 2,000 रुपए का, you bought it. No, that was not allowed. You had to buy a complete unit. In that case, what used to happen was, let's say I am telling someone that, okay, let's say 10% of your entire asset allocation should be towards REITs, right? Alternate assets. Generally, I tell people that 10%, 15% should be alternate, and alternate includes gold, alternate includes your different commodities as well. But okay, let's assume someone is doing exact 10% in REITs. Now, what happens is someone with a corpus of, let's say 20 lakhs, 10% would mean 2 lakhs. 2 lakhs goes into entire one REIT, and he cannot diversify. So he cannot put in an Embassy as well as Mindspace. Just like you are putting in, let's say, Tata Motors as well as Maruti. That wasn't possible in case someone has that kind of a corpus, because aapka 1,10,000, 1,20,000, and depending upon what share price is, already your and share price actually from 300 it went to 500, 550 before COVID hit, right? So in that case, it was almost like ticket size would be 2 lakhs plus in the for just buying one lot of Embassy. Now recently, last 2-3 weeks, 2-3 weeks back, what happened was finally SEBI said, okay, now I think we are good. The retail investor should be okay with investing this kind of a money in REITs and InvITs. Anyways, these days retail investors are taking much higher risk in normal equities, so REITs and InvITs so बहुत ही safe हो जाता है उसके लिए. So they reduce the unit size. They reduce the minimum application size to just one unit. Now, if Embassy REIT is currently trading at 350, I can just put in 350 rupees and then can buy one unit, and then easily diversification can happen. So today I can put in Embassy as well as Mindspace, as well as Brookfield, as well as Power Grid, InvIT, blah blah blah. Right. So this is one good news, that liquidity will increase. Which one you should put in money, whether you should put in money or not, why are these assets, why are these REITs and InvITs classified into an alternative, not an equity? what is the underlying, kind of dividend distribution policies and this and that, blah, blah, why a trust, what are the taxations. These all nitty gritties probably we will be touching in this session. And by the end of the session, my objective is that you should be clear that whether this is for you or not for you. And if yes, then how to invest in this, and why not confuse, and why not, kind of ask things like the questions like, why not a physical real estate? I mean, why not buying a home, and why to buy this kind of a REIT unit? As usual, questions in the chat box. I'll try to cover each and every one question of that. This is my first attempt to cover such a technical topic, so I'm also just experimenting how it goes. Audience anyways is pretty less than what I normally have, so that answers one part of my question. Okay, so but I hope that only the interested people are there in this session today. With this, I welcome Mrinal. Mrinal, would you like to give your introduction? I would rather suggest you to do that yourself, so and then we start.
First of all, thanks a lot, Weber. So as I believe all of your audience, I am also one of the person who is reading your interesting LinkedIn tweets or LinkedIn posts rather. I'm also
tweets. I'm not on Twitter, so tweets is
sorry. Yeah. So basically, I'm a chartered accountant basically. And back in 2015, I qualified, and post working with the HDFC Bank, I joined K Raheja Group. So that group happens to be the one of the group's business happens to be commercial real estate. So they had a private equity.
Now, for the audience, I understand my audience well, because I hope, Mrinal, you also know that you have been in one of my previous sessions. I tend to, kind of break it down to such simple, understanding for the audience. So I will keep on, in the middle, I keep on stopping you and asking you to explain this concept more in detail. Okay.
Absolutely.
I hope you don't mind. Commercial real estate. Define commercial real estate.
Right. So basically, they are into business of leasing. Basically, their main forte is generating rental income. Now, their rental income is of different businesses. One is office space business, and a typical office space business is that particular business where a tenant has come on board in a particular developed premises and tend to stay for around 9 to 15 to 25 years. So that's a typical grade A typical real estate market which is working in India.
Grade A.
Grade A. And why I say grade A? Because 80 to 85% of the tenants of this particular sector are Fortune 500 sector.
So what are the different grades in that case? So grade A is okay. I understand that the premium kind of a space is called grade A. Absolutely. There are grade B, grade C as well. How does that happen?
Absolutely. So you must have heard a simple builder who is building a particular office space around you. He might not be able to qualify all the standards which are required to be qualified at an international level. Whereas there are many councils which have been working for a grade A structure, and this is common for entire world. It's not just for India. There is something called LEED certificate that building should have this number of set of lifts, this number set of floors. So that all is taken care of in a grade A sort of asset. Now, if let's suppose,
so those who are just off topic. So those who are from Mumbai, guys, in the session, I'm very sure that you would have been to BKC and seen that Citibank building, right? So the big Citibank building across the MMRDA ground. That Citibank building is one of the properties belonging to Embassy REIT. And when Mrinal will explain how the REIT is formed and what all different buildings are kept into that kind of a thing, that Citibank building is also one of the assets belonging to Embassy REIT, listed Embassy REIT unit.
Yeah. To add to the people who are living in Western Line, you must be aware about Mindspace Malad. So another option can be Mindspace Malad to correlate that particular example. Now, what actually happens? Let's suppose a developer A, or I would rather say like K Raheja was a developer. So they developed different sort of assets. Now, one particular asset which we are discussing here is office spaces. Now, these sort of office spaces are given to Fortune 500 tenants who usually have 9 to 15 years. And the inbuilt, what they look for, the tenants look for that the asset should be grade A assets. Now, it's not a single floor of asset. What they are usually looking into a IT park. Why IT park? I'll explain you guys. They are looking into IT park or a particular building which is not a strata building. Strata building is like a small square feet sort of area. That is a particular strata sort of thing. Whereas a complete building which is owned by a particular developer gives you an extra added advantage of maintaining that particular building for its entire life. And so there are, and we will see in the coming years also, these particular, all the three REITs are working in IT office parks, except Embassy, which has a little portion of hotel, which is 8%. That's it. All the three REITs are completely into IT office parks. And why IT office parks? Because they take that particular land, they develop it, or they get it developed from some other developer, get that particular into their portfolio. They take care of that portfolio in terms of leasing, in terms of operational, in terms of redevelopment. And why redevelopment? I'm saying because redevelopment is something which will be getting new in the market, and which will be NAV accretive also. So that's also an important thing. I'll explain NAV concept in future slides, future thing as well. Now,
so Mrinal, coming back to, actually, I actually interrupted you at a very wrong place when you were introducing yourself, and I went on to what commercial real estate is. So just complete it, and then probably we'll take the concept of REIT further.
So Vaibhav, I think I can take with this along. So basically, for entire REIT process of Mindspace REIT, I've been a party from way back when we thought of bringing in public issue. We were deciding between REITs or IPO. Starting from that particular scenario till the end, till 31st March, I would rather say, I was working with Mindspace REIT in a core team of that. Post that, I joined Blackstone as a Blackstone private equity as a separate role there.
Got it. So great to have you, Mrinal. And to be honest, I saw that you have been a part of Mindspace REIT. And I was on the other side, you were, so all you corporate guys are actually bankers ko bolte rehte, ye karo, wo karo, ye karo. So I knew ki on the other hand, obviously, if I'm dealing with people like you, so you guys are my clients if I am a part of an investment banking team. Anyways, so Mrinal, before we go further, I would just want to explain all the guys what actually a REIT is in very simple layman terms, and then obviously you can top it up in some bit of technical stuff which probably I will miss out. So guys, in very, very layman terms, REITs is nothing but a kind of a mutual fund. It's kind of a mutual fund where what goes into a normal equity mutual funds are different kind of stocks. What goes into a REIT is basically different real estate assets. Now, like Mrinal explained, that there can be a commercial real estate, which can be an office. So Embassy REIT is an office plus a little bit of hotel. Just assume it's completely office. So I don't remember exact numbers if they have increased or not, but when they listed, there were 12 such properties across India, which Embassy decided to put into this kind of a mutual fund or a REIT offering, which was across different cities. So 4 were in Mumbai, I think 2-3 were in Bangalore, Delhi, Pune, blah, blah, different places, because Embassy is a developer, right? Embassy with Blackstone being a backer, a private equity, real estate private equity player, and Embassy being a developer. So उन्होंने ये सोचा कि ये 12 properties को हम लोग इसमें एक REIT उसमें structure में डाल देते हैं. That doesn't mean that Embassy has only those 12 properties. It may have lot more, but they picked those 12 according to what Blackstone के साथ जो decide हुआ, and then they would have made it into a REIT kind of structure. Now, the idea of a REIT is that it is being the building, the entire office space. Obviously, it is being leased out to different tenants. So, for example, I gave you the example of the Citibank building. If someone knows about that, there was a Starbucks in over there. There is another Hitchki kind of a hotel restaurant over there. And then if you go to different floors of the building, then it's not only Citibank, it's other office premises or other tenants also who have taken a floor or who have taken half a floor or something. So अब ये सब लोग उनको rent देते होंगे. Now, when they are getting those rent, obviously there is some kind of a rent agreement, which probably as an individual, you also, if you are living in a rented place, आप लोग का भी rental agreement बना होगा with your landlord. So generally that agreement is like every year 5% rental escalation, or every 3 years there has to be a 15% rental escalation, or whatever that kind of a thing is. Now these guys monthly or quarterly, all these tenants would be providing some kind of a rent to these Embassy Blackstone, right? Basically the REIT assets, whatever the SPV, they generally make an SPV out of those REITs. So unko pura rent jata hai. Now, the idea for a REIT, real estate investment trust, basically it's a trust. So when you say something as a trust, so it gets some kind of a taxation benefits, right? In order to get those taxation benefits and the structure properly, they will have to distribute whatever rental they are getting from their tenants to their people who are owning that REIT. When you own that REIT, that means you have bought. So just like a share, if you own one Reliance share, you are an owner of Reliance company, 0.00001% or whatever. So similarly, if you are owning one unit of a Blackstone Embassy REIT, you are entitled to get that kind of a distribution which they are getting from their tenant. अब compulsory part ये है कि उनको 90% of the distribution of the rental income what they are getting, they have to distribute. So basically your net income, basically 90% of net income after deducting all sorts of expenses, maintenance expense, this and that, they have to compulsorily distribute as a dividend. You can say it's not a dividend, it's a distribution, which is a part of, it has a lot of sub parts in it, which Mrinal will come to it, that it will have interest component, dividend component, etc. blah blah. And then there are 3 or 4 other clauses as well. Once the REIT actually kind of tick boxes all those 3 or 4 or 5 clauses, it will continue to be called a REIT, and you will continue to get that distribution. Generally, it's quarterly or a semi-annually, and then accordingly taxation is paid. Taxation is also a pretty complex in this kind of a thing. What happens over there is, because the rental lease kind of payment is kind of fixed and the escalation is fixed already, it is in the agreement. So until and unless the tenant just goes bankrupt and वो छोड़ के चला गया, rental agreement भी उसने नहीं माना, so this is generally considered to be as a kind of a fixed kind of an inflow which a REIT is getting. कि इतना तो मुझे मिल ही जाएगा. It can easily project how much money it is going to make from those tenants, and hence it is a kind of a fixed income instrument. It takes a form of a fixed income instrument where end customer knows, the end investor knows कि we are definitely going to get इतना rupees every quarter. तो हो गया ये fixed income instrument का इसमें kind of type of a fixed income instrument. And that also has an equity component, because first, why it is trading. So it is trading, so its value obviously ऊपर नीचे जाएगा. So 300 went to 550 for Embassy, and now it is again back to 350. So that kind of an equity risk is always there. Second, they can also kind of make new properties, get in more than 12. तो अभी 12 है तो 13th property भी आ सकती है, उसमें 14th भी आ सकती है. So all these future expansion possibilities are also there. Then obviously the value of your property is rising, just like what Mrinal was saying. The NAV accretion is basically the value of the property rising, or kind of net asset value going up. So it has a bit of tinge of equity kind of a component as well. So this is a hybrid instrument which has both sorts of characteristics of a fixed income as well as equity, and hence I can't classify in my asset allocation as either an equity, pure play equity, or a pure play fixed income. I will have to classify it as an alternate assets. Although you can also argue argue that okay, अगर इसमें ऐसा है तो let me just bifurcate this into that 70% is fixed income, 30% is equity, but it's very difficult. ऐसा होता नहीं है. So hence keep it completely aside. Similar is the way with अभी तो office REITs के बारे में बात की, but we can also talk about similar kind of a thing from retail REIT. Let's say mall. If mall का IPO आता है, so what happens? All these malls are also leased out to different outlets, right? Restaurants हो गए, shopping centers हो गए, whatever. The big brands, pantaloons and all, they will also be providing some kind of a rent to the owner of the mall. Similar concept, right? Education in universities can also be leased out. Warehouses are also built and leased out to, let's say, Amazon or Flipkart, or smaller kind of place. Wherever there is a tenant and lease and rental kind of an arrangement, it's a REIT. Similarly, for the InvIT, where the whosoever is providing the kind of a fixed cash flows are basically the end users of that kind of, so power transmission, for example, Sterlite InvIT, which is IndiGrid InvIT, who is providing what kind of cash flows for what usage is what is going to be defined as what kind of an InvIT it is. So this is a mutual fund because your risk is getting diversified across 12 assets for a Blackstone Embassy, rather than one particular real estate building, one particular office building जहाँ पे कोई प्रॉब्लम आ गई तो पूरा एसेट जाएगा. तो वही है, रिस्क का डाइवर्सिफिकेशन है. As an end user, as an end investor, I am sure you can't buy a complete Citibank wali building or even one floor in it. So why not make use of this kind of an asset class where you can take a part and kind of get that kind of a fixed cash flow offering from the tenant if it's a high quality building. So with that, I will stop here, and now let's Mrinal do the technical talking of what it is. Mrinal, keep it simple. Don't go too much into the technicals, and I will keep an eye on the questions as well if they are coming in.
Sure. So I'm just presenting. I've prepared some slides. I think that would be helpful to everyone right out here. Let me know if it is visible now.
Yeah, it is.
So Vaibhav, you explained, and I'll just take 10 to 15 minutes for the read purchase slides, not more than that. And obviously, in between, you want to interrupt or ask some questions, we are happy to take that because it will be in the flow, right? So as Vaibhav explained and clearly, just a second, how to minimize this?
So what do you need to do? Press escape. No?
Oh. It's visible, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. So basically, as Vaibhav told, so the REITs are basically what? REITs are basically an instrument which cannot be said as a fixed instrument, fixed income instrument or equity. Yes, it is yield oriented also, and it is capital appreciated also. As he mentioned about embassy rate getting from 300 to 515 and then coming back to 350. So that's capital appreciation thing, and yield is, yes, they are giving around 7% as of now. So what exactly REITs cover? So REITs basically cover, they cover offices, hotels, right? Retail, industrial is warehouse, and now the new thing coming to the market, it's data centers. It's somewhat same as warehouses, but yes, all the three REITs are giving commentary about this particular thing, that we in future will be doing a lot of data centers. Obviously, these deals are yield accretive. That's why they are saying that particular thing. And healthcare premises is something same. History of REITs, yes, in 1960 REITs came, and if you see, there are around 40 countries where REIT exist. Yes, Pakistan started its REIT in 2008. We started in 2014. These are the 40 countries, including all G7, and these are the countries which are competing with us because we just came and we have not explored so much. But yes, the private equity investors and these guys are focusing on all those markets as well. Now, just coming to the structure of a particular REIT, and I'll give you with an example also. So let's suppose there is a property, as we are taking example of Citibank building only. So there is a property of Citibank building, and that is in a particular SPV. So why in particular SPV? Because it's easy to manage that particular property operations and everything. Then that particular property can be holded directly by REIT, or it can be held by a holdco structure. So there, as of now, there is no holdco structure for all three REITs, but the REIT itself own the particular SPVs. Now, what REIT is how REIT is formed? A trustee forms a particular REIT basis sponsors. So so basically sponsors are the developers or investors, like in the case of Embassy, it was Blackstone. So they particularly appointed trustee and asked him to get all the properties into REIT, which will be managed by a manager. So manager.
Mrinal, I'm a little bit kind of skeptical if people will understand the. I know they will understand the concept of sponsor because it's being sponsored by Blackstone and Embassy. Right. But trustee, if you can just explain, because it's a trust, you need a trustee. But what does a trustee do? If you can just explain.
So just trustee, what does trustee do? Trustee is an external party which is appointed by the sponsors to look after the assets. So this particular structure was followed by SEBI because they wanted to overlook the REIT assets. And obviously, we all know real estate is a market which has been filled with all sort of bad news and all. And as of now, regulators are so stringent about that they want more and more third parties to be involved in a particular sector. So as of now, if we talk about Embassy or Mindspace, they have Axis Bank Trustee Group as their trustee. So they are an independent third party which has no influence from sponsors, managers, or any other working, and they're not allowed to invest also in this particular structure. So they just overlook this particular structure. But yes, every decision making has to flow first from trustee, then to SEBI. There is no other option available with them. Yes.
So how much interference can a trustee do in kind of a regular operations
of every board meeting, every presentation, everything has to be first overlooked by trustee. Then only it can go to board, it can go to any other particular department, including SEBI.
Oh, they play a very important role in that.
Yeah, they play a very important. So frankly speaking, a particular manager is interacting on a 15-day basis with trustee. So that's the level of control the trustee has in this particular structure. Now, in respect of manager, the trustee appoints manager. And what does manager do? So it takes care of all the operations, including leasing, including operations of that particular sort of assets, including distribution of cash flows, holding board meetings, or any sort of. So basically, manager is someone who can be said as a portfolio manager or an AMC guy in the terms of mutual fund, if you want to correlate.
Mrinal, how is the trustee paid? Someone is asking, Rochak is asking.
So basically, they are paid a fixed amount of fees, which has been finalized. So that's not a percentage. That's a fixed fees they have been charging, and
Okay.
it's common for all the trusts working in India. That's
Okay.
nothing different.
Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly, since we spoke about fees, yes, fees is paid to manager also, and this is subtracted from the rentals which we were expecting to receive. So Mindspace has around fee structure of 3.5%, whereas Embassy has a structure of some different structure, which is like 1.25% different, and that's also adding to 3.5. And if we go into percentage terms, then India is the cheapest in terms of manager fees to be charged.
And Mrinal, as I gave the example that a REIT is like a mutual fund, a lot of times people keep asking expense ratios of mutual fund, which are down to less than 1% now, 1.2%. In REIT, you are saying that 3.5%, which is akin to a fund manager managing the, kind of an expense ratio, and it's the cheapest in the world, right?
In the entire world. Yeah. So the important thing is in 3.5%, they have to take care of this trustee fees as well.
Okay, all right.
Now they are bearing all those components from themselves only. They are not giving anything else to anyone, including the salary of every damn employee. So that's all covered in this 3.5%.
How is a trustee different from a manager? Both oversee, but one is external and the other
So
is internal.
So he works on all day-to-day operations, whereas he just trustee overlooks on all the operations.
Okay, got it. So manager would be deciding on what kind of rental agreements are actually being signed, which kind of assets are going to be brought in, what operational, kind of activities are to be taken in, all these kind of things, right?
Absolutely. So they will also look after the treasury aspect also. Okay. As I think you guys might be aware, now interest have gone a lot down, right? So all these streets have come into the market and launched many of the non-convertible debentures. So they are able to reduce their 200 basis point from last 2 years. So they are able to achieve that particular feat, and that this particular working is totally carried out by manager.
Right. And is there any cap on the manager's fees?
Yes.
By SEBI?
So this is the max. No, by SEBI, no. But the SEBI has the cap on different things. SEBI has told that 90% you have to distribute. So in any case, they cannot cross that particular number. Okay. And they have to overlook of all the O&M expenses and all the expenses also. They have to pay interest also. So they have to manage in all the aspects for that particular. They cannot compromise on that 7% they have been quoting, right?
Got it. Chalo, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a structure of company. All the countries having REIT. Now, why restructure has been so preferred by all the markets around the world? So this is the broad structure which is followed across the world, right? So now what is happening? The minimum condition or the minimum developer experience or investor experience like Blackstone should be at least 5% in real estate, and SEBI is too stringent in approving all these sort of conditions. So they are checking this condition on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, frankly, because they don't want REIT to get into the other typical traditional real estate we have seen across our lives, right? We have seen in our lives. Another is at any point of time and at all point of time, all the total value of assets, 80% of all the value of assets should be completed and rent generating. It's a compulsion, and you cannot breach this particular on any day. So if you are acquiring under construction assets, it should not be that this 80% can go down. It cannot, in any case cannot breach. And there was something which was discussed in many of the forums by many of the people saying that now everyone can come with REIT. No. So there should be minimum 500 CR that has been set up, and SEBI proposes to increase this particular number also because they want this to be a niche market, a complete niche market about that. So that's why they have said that 500 CR should be minimum investment from a REIT per se, so that they are able to bring a REIT. I have forgot to add something. As of now, only public REITs are allowed in India. No one can have a private REIT in India. So you have to go to all the formalities of SEBI, RBI, and all those. So you are not exempt from any of the formalities in that particular sense. Another one is simple, that all the revenue income which you have been reporting, 51 should be at least from rental, and for everyone it is like 99%. It's not below 99%. Another criteria is now there is a capping on the debt you can take. So REITs are allowed to take debt as much as possible as 49%. In this 49% also, 25% of their debt can be taken freely. Just above 25%, for every single rupee they want to borrow, they have to take unanimous approval from their unit shareholders. This is just a simple slide, just explaining how it is beneficial to investors. Now, how can an investor trade? So investor can be anyone. Investor can be a domestic guy, or foreign guy, a retail guy. Since investor education is low, as of now, 70% of the investment is held by the foreign companies, not Indians. Because yes, obviously Indians are not able to understand what actually REITs are. Secondly, earlier REITs there were minimum 200 units, as Vaibhav clearly explained, that we actually have to put a much higher amount. So
Mrinal, this is going to be actually changed, because even today, if I go and buy, it shows me a unit minimum unit.
So SEBI told we proposed to do that, but SEBI has not made it clear when they proposed to do that.
Right. Okay, yeah. I mean, if SEBI have given a green signal, it's not going to take much time, because REIT guys also were wanting ki yaar kam karo to liquidity badhe.
Frankly, because I have been into the manager team also, so we were proposing for 25,000. They come up with the 15,000 itself only.
Very
so
good.
SEBI have taken a very proactive approach. That's very good part on SEBI. Sure. How can we purchase? And this has been one very common question, ki how one can get into REIT markets. So you just have to log in your Demat account and just go and search all these 3 REIT BSE or NSE codes. And
actually you just type in REIT, you get all the 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like a normal stock, yeah. So
absolutely. And yes, and frankly, so there are 4 more REITs coming, and that's been public news. It's not something which I'm telling you. There are 4 more REITs which I've been planning coming 2 years. Axis obviously printed its report. So there's Kotak, which has its fund of REIT, if you are aware.
Yeah.
So they have said that in coming 3 years, there will be 10 more REITs coming in India. So everyone's too bullish about REITs coming into Indian markets.
Guys, I'll cover this Kotak FOF, fund of REITs, towards the end, because that's also one of the questions, whether we should invest in that kind of an instrument or not, in like for a mutual fund. But Mrinal, do you recollect, or do you remember what 4 REITs are there? I mean, I have no clue.
So one is the largest guy of Pune, Panchsheel. Another one happens to be one of the largest resi guy of Bangalore, Prestige. Another happens to be another is Sattva Salarpuria, and frankly, some of the portion of these all REITs are somewhere linked with Blackstone. So Blackstone is the biggest landlord in India, by the way.
That I know. And one more thing, guys, if you can say that, okay, Prestige as an equity is already listed.
Absolutely.
So that doesn't mean that they can't be listed as a REIT, because as I said, they can just take out some of the assets from their entire bouquet of so many properties and all, and then put into a separate REIT and get that listed. So tomorrow you can also see a DLF REIT or a Prestige REIT.
Yeah. The fourth one is DLF.
Oh, it's DLF. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So but Prestige is, as you said, it's residential. I just want to understand one thing, Mrinal, and this is where I'm coming from, what happens in Australia. So in Australia, the residential properties were never converted to a REIT, because the general idea is that if you're constructing a residential property by the developer, it is completely sold off to the end tenant, because I am going to purchase my flat or whatever, right? Correct? My unit. And then probably I am the owner of my building or my apartment, my unit, and then probably I can lease it out to a tenant. So for example, I am living in Mumbai as a tenant, and I am paying my rent to my landlord who is based out of somewhere else. And this is a Raheja building. Absolutely. Now, Raheja, being a direct owner of this property, is never going to, I mean, I don't know in Mumbai it happens or not. So as a tenant, I will never be paying my rental to Raheja.
Right.
So वो rental का concept residential में Australia में तो नहीं आता था. Is it what you are saying Prestige में ऐसा होने वाला है क्या?
No. So as of now in India, only commercial real estate is allowed, because residential is too messed up. First, they want to clear with the RERA thing, then they want to get into other things, right?
Exactly.
So I'll tell you, Weber, good you asked. So this particular things happen in US. So US is a typical market which has all sort of REITs. It has student housing REITs. It has different sort of schools, hospitals, and all those sort of REITs. So what happens now, if continuing with your example itself, let's suppose Raheja comes to you and tells you, okay, you invested in this property and you want this property to be leased out and to generate a fixed rental out of this. I'll propose you a scheme that I'll bring a REIT, you give your asset to this particular REIT and get an equivalent amount of REIT shares. whatever you want to do with that shares, you are okay with that shares. And out of that shares, let's take out of 10 or 15% of that shares and list it to a public market.
Got it. Got it.
So if you, so now you are, so you just have to wake up and go to the market and just have to sell your shares if you want. So the liquidity crunch of the real estate is totally gone off from the market. So you will be able to achieve, obviously you will be able to generate rents, but yes, you have to pay a small property management fees. So India is not such structured, whereas US, everyone who wants to get into a particular lease or rent agreement, they have to do it from a property management company. There is two popular concept of property management company. As we know, India is a little unorganized market as of now. Now,
Exactly.
let me go. Shall I go for the?
Yeah, of course. Sorry.
So now this is basically the golden thing everyone wants to know. So how REITs distribute their particular income? So there are three sort of income which can be part of a distribution matrix. One is the rental income that they generate. Now what happens? All the SPVs have different projects, and they generate rent out of that projects. Now from this rent income, they transfer this rent income to REIT, and REIT has to adopt a pass-through policy. So whatever REIT receives, they have to distribute. There is no such condition that they can hold that money and enjoy that money. They cannot. They have to distribute at least 90% out of that. And SPVs also translates in that particular fashion that they give maximum so that can be distributed. Ultimately, it's controlled by the particular single management, right? There is a manager who is doing all sort of planning for this particular set. Now, what is interest component? So I'll take example of MBC because MBC is the perfect case in this particular example. Now, MBC, when they came within their IPO, what they did took entire debt of all the SPVs and just cleared off all the debts from the banks or financial institutions. So on the list, post applying application of money, there was zero debt company. Now what they did, they started taking debt for more development on REIT itself rather than taking loan on SPVs. So they didn't take a loan on a particular property, rather they took a loan on a particular REIT. Obviously they had to mortgage. So what they mortgaged was a particular SPV's properties. They mortgaged that particular thing, but REIT was able to take that particular debt. Now REIT being, so all the three REITs are AAA assets. They are AAA, they are the credit, wherever you would like to add on that. So AAA credit.
I think they'll understand AAA. I mean best in the market.
In the market. And how bankers look is they want to maintain their portfolio mix in a proper way, so they are ready to give at a little lower rate also. At let's suppose it is 7%, they are okay with 6.5% because they know कि हमारा portfolio भी अच्छी तरह manage हो जाएगा due to AAA assets. Now REIT takes that particular debts and gives that particular to SPV, which requires to do its day-to-day operations or development of the property. Now, while distributing, they have to pay interest back to REIT. So they pay back that particular in the name of interest. And when they pay in the name of interest, REIT has to compulsorily distribute that particular interest to unit shareholders. And exactly same happens with the third point, that the loan they have taken, they have to give back the principal for that particular loan, and that is also distributed to the unit shareholders. Tax treatment per se, this return of capital is treated in the investor hands as a reduction in cost of the share purchase. So they have to reduce their cost because they are getting their capital back. So this is a particular thing which has been happening. Now, as per regulations, every 6 months they have to distribute, but all the three REITs are distributing in quarterly basis. And this particular dividend, this particular rent, as per is totally exempt in the hand of investors as well as REIT. So REIT is also not paying any tax out of that, and investors are also not paying any sort of tax. But yes, interest is taxable as the applicable taxable slab. There's difference in capital gains also. So in normal cycle, we have 365 days as in normal equity cycle, we have 365 days to classify it as a long term and short term. But being in hybrid instrument, they have changed this particular law to 3 years, same as a real estate property sort of capital gains. Now there is 15% for long term Short-term capital gain and long-term capital gain is at 10%. Should I move ahead? Any sort of, I think you are.
Yeah, I think so. So I'll just
right?
reiterate the taxation point, part of it, guys. So what happens is whenever you are getting a distribution from the REIT or even InvIT, basically you will be told that what component is from interest income and what component is your dividend income, and accordingly you can compute it. No tax on dividend, but yes, full slab, the maximum slab rate on your interest income. And then obviously if you're holding the unit, then capital gains tax will only be applicable once you sell out, which is similar to what happens in equity and probably a debt mutual fund or direct equities. It is a little bit of different from what it is in equities, because in equities you would remember 12 months is STCG, short-term capital gains tax, and long-term capital gains is 12 months plus. But in as Mrinal is saying, for REITs is basically 3 years for short term. Mrinal, I'm not very sure on that, but I'm just taking that. Okay, you would know it better.
Yeah.
So 3 years is your duration, right, for short term capital gains tax and long term capital gains tax. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Just to add one single point, as of now, so there is a calculation which has to be distributed. So 90% is of cash flows, not rents. So there is a calculation which is given by SEBI, so which includes tax refunds. So they have to distribute tax refunds if they are generating as income. They have to set off some sort of expenses also. So but more or less all the three are giving in their investor presentation that they are able to achieve 98 or 99% of their rentals, which they are able to collect. And so they are now, because they are able to collect 98 and 98% of the rents, they are able to distribute more than 95% as of now. So both the REITs, Mindspace and Blackstone, MBC rather, are able to distribute more than 95%. They are not restricting themselves to the 90% thing, because they want to develop a goodwill in the market for that matter.
Mrinal, a quick question from Shubham. He's saying in this current slide, he can't see the need to distribute, that they need to distribute the capital appreciation part. I just want to clarify if they're obliged to distribute it or not.
No, they are not obliged, or it is not written anywhere that they have to distribute. It's up to REIT how they want to distribute. So I'll tell you, when Embassy came, Embassy was just distributing maximum of interest and no of capital, no of and very less of rent. So they were not so tax heavy. So they were distributing around 50%. Whereas Mindspace came, Mindspace was distributing 92% of rents. So they were a little tax savvy also. Now this quarter, Q4 21, they came with a new thing that they will distribute return of capital as well. Now they are 78%. So now they are also in line with the in Mindspace. Now they are also calling themselves as a tax saving instrument. Now this is some factors, and I think there are many more factors which people usually believe because of work from home scenario. I completely agree, but these are some factors which one can look in a particular REIT to just have a look at what should be the perfect REIT they wish to invest. One is the leasing track records. All the three companies on a quarterly basis are giving the investor presentation and explaining very clearly about how their leasing is moving on quarter basis. Second is occupancy trend. Yes, occupancy is something which has been suffering from last 2 or 3 quarters, but work from home will not sustain is something which everyone is repeating.
I think we'll discuss about work from home thing when we are done with this, because this is one burning question even I had. Right, abhi work from home ho jayega, so why should I invest in REIT? So we'll take it later verbally.
I have strong numbers over that. We'll discuss
later, and we need to quickly speed up because it's already 5:23. So we have to cover a little bit of InvIT also after this.
Sure. So another one is the releasing spread. So what releasing spread is? So I'll frankly give you an example. In India, keeping BKC, some part of Bombay, some part of Bangalore, some part of Gurgaon,
Pune, Hyderabad,
some part of these particular cities. Across India, the rentals are not more than $1 per square feet. So it's been always said ki, why will investors come? The market has been rising. Just think from a perspective of Barclays or Accenture, for that matter, who has all his assets in different countries. When he comes to India, he say, India is just $1 per. For him, the calculation runs into dollars, right? For him, India, the rent is never a question that has come into the minds for these guys. They don't want to negotiate on rental numbers, rather they focus on more about areas and efficiencies on all those things, or good quality assets, obviously. So these are the negotiation points. So India being a little poor country in some terms of per square feet rental, it's never happens to be a question. But yes, since the property have been leased at a lower rental, the releasing spread is higher. So what is releasing spread? Let's suppose a tenant, for example, at Citibank in that Embassy building wants to leave now, and it leaves, and they suppose let XYZ company comes. So the market rent in BKC as of now, let's suppose it's 200 and Citibank was working at 120. So the 80 rupees cushion is the releasing spread they are gaining. And releasing is a lot focused by the investor community also, because they believe that's the potential. If that get converted, that will be seen in valuation, and valuation will always be in favor of the investors. So that's the way they guys are looking for that particular thing. Upcoming supply is something which
one
is
point, because we have been speaking about Citibank building a lot of times. One point I would want to make is, and probably you would know, Mrinal, Citibank as a tenant has been kept outside the entire, kind of whatever the kind of, because Citibank, there is some kind of an arrangement. I'm not very sure.
I'll just give you a clarity. Citibank owns that particular place.
Citibank owns that. Yeah. So
they bought out.
Yes, they bought out. Yeah. We call it Citibank building because everybody knows by that name.
So that's the USP of that particular building. That's the only
right.
thing. Yeah.
Right.
So
okay, go ahead.
Now upcoming supply. Why upcoming supply is important? Because it's a typical NAV. So what let's suppose Mindspace has a valuation of 25,000 crores. Now let's suppose they are able to add assets of 1,000 crores more. So if they are able to add 1,000 crore more assets, now the way the valuation works is they will calculate the future cash flows of that, and that future cash flows will be always NAV accretive for that particular thing. So this is the way they do. And as Vaibhav also mentioned, it's not ki Embassy has just put their 12 properties. Yes, they have their another 3 or 4 properties, and if you see, they all have come in front. And if you see Brookfield, so Brookfield is just quoting their 14 million square feet assets, but they have so much of assets with them ready leased that they can achieve to 28.9, and that's the reason they took loan for. They come to the market for the IPO thing. So they will be gaining in that particular sense also. Next is concentration mix. So I'll explain this particular point later. That is the perfect which can be explained in Brookfield thing. Another is sector mix. Let's suppose IT as a sector says ki we just want to go work from home. And if let's suppose everyone in all the 3 REITs are totally IT parks and totally IT tenants, then yes, obviously lag gaye. And geographical presence, yes, geographical presence is important. Why important? Because we cannot say a REIT coming in Calcutta will be much better than coming in Bombay. Because obviously Bombay has a typical corporate crowd as compared to Calcutta. Not a particular, but yes, just giving an example for that particular sense.
So these are basically the points which you should keep in mind when you're analyzing REITs. Just like you have so many things like we do ROCE, ROE, and all those kind of things for equity whenever you are analyzing a stock. So probably these are the things. There is also a thing called WALE, WALE. I don't know how much importance that is, weighted average lease expiry. So the higher the weighted average lease expiry, better it is, because you know that okay, nobody, agar ye log chhod ke मतलब leasing khatam bhi ho gaya inka agreement, and then you are going and scouting for new tenants, that is a hassle, right? So jitna zyada lease expiry bacha hoga abhi, time remaining, it's better, right? So that's one more point. Yeah, go ahead.
So I try to compare all the 3 REITs, and I think this might help you guys. So basically, Embassy got in first April 2019. It came. August 20 was the Mindspace REIT, and Feb 21 was the latest Brookfield REIT. The prices they came and the NAV they are trading is, so Brookfield is obviously on discount as of now. NAV is something which the valuer gives, and the good part about this is, so they have to get their properties, all the properties valued on a 6 monthly basis. They don't have an option for that. They have to report that thing also. And as compared to the equity market, where we have to get an annual report on once in a year, they have to give it twice a year. So they have to cover every damn aspect. So they are very transparent in that particular perspective. Yeah. So say they are as of now discount to NAV. I think market sentiments is little bit different for real estate, especially commercial real estate as of now. That's why the things have been negative. Embassy moved to 518. That was its all-time high, which at what price they moved. Portfolio wise, Asia's largest REIT is Embassy in terms of million square feet. Asia's second largest REIT is Mindspace REIT as of now. So in terms of area, we are the highest and second highest in the world. Distribution per se, Embassy was able to distribute 21 rupees, which was approximately 7% at current price, whereas Mindspace was able to distribute 10 point something, which is 7% because they have this is annualized return. This is not the half year return comes to be 3.5%, but annual return is 7%. Brookfield, since they launched recently and they decided not to declare dividend for March quarter because rules says that you have to complete one single quarter. So after one single quarter, they will be able to distribute for first half year 12 rupees, 12.5 rupees, which also comes to around 8% as of now. But yeah, things can be at any point, at any point. The last year target, which both the REITs gave, they are able to achieve that target. There is just 0.02%, which was the difference, but they were able to achieve that particular thing. Completed area is the total area which they have completed, and they are able to complete that particular area. Acha, not to get confused, that 80% thing which we were talking earlier is the value, and this is the in area terms. So this is something different. Rent per square feet, I told you the rent per square feet for all the three, for entire India rather, is less than $1 per square feet. So if you see that 71, 56, so see the potential the Mindspace as well as Brookfield and Embassy has to go up to a good rental for that matter. Vale is what Vaibhav spoke, that Vale of Embassy as well as Brookfield is 7 years rather. I have not written that. 7 years is their Vale. So let's suppose all the properties get complete their tenure. So that would be 7 years from now. Occupancy has gone a little bit down. And the reason for occupancy going down is obviously not certainty about COVID and all those things. Location, yes, I've just put these numbers for the diversification. And since I missed that particular point of top 10 in concentration, that's because see the level Embassy and Mindspace has is just top 10 tenants are 40%. And let's suppose Google or some other big tenants, Barclays or Accenture comes forward saying we just want to give away all our assets and just want to go on a complete work from home model, this would be the least affected. And yes, this will be the more affected in that particular case. Obviously here the portfolio size is also small, so the percentage is a component of that thing also. So that's a broad picture what I have done for REITs. I'm done with REITs.
I think yes, great. Guys, REIT should be clear, and if you guys start asking which REIT I should invest into, we are not recommending anything, yeah, but personally my favorite is Embassy REIT, but that's not a recommendation for you guys. So you can take your call. Now that diversification is allowed, buy one unit of all three. It is also possible, and then observe how things are happening. But now I would request Mrinal to go and cover InvIT. Given if I have a choice today to invest in a REIT or an InvIT, I will rather take an InvIT. Now why and what happens in InvIT? It's almost a similar kind of structure. The only thing is the underlying is different. Yeah. It's not real estate but infrastructure.
Yeah. So just quickly, this particular slide, this particular slide will be the only difference thing. Rest all is same. So regulations is same, reporting is same, distribution matrix is same, taxability is same. Nothing is going to change here. The only difference is the nature of business. So I'll take example of infra itself. So IRB Infra REIT basically. So what IRB Infra business is, so they have developed, they have taken on concession period. Concession period is basically a sort of lease which you take from government for a particular land on which you will develop road or highways. So let's suppose they have taken that particular for a concession period of 15 years. Now what IRB will do, IRB will build a road, then will operate that, and while operating that particular road, it will generate toll income from that. Now they have just 15 years. So the earlier they complete, the more they get toll from that particular thing. Then post that they have to transfer it to government. And this is happening for entire road projects in the country. No matter it is an NHI road or it is a PWD road. So they have to follow this particular structure. Now obviously they have to raise money because there is a lot of cost in construction involved. So the options available can be coming with an equity or a debt or a fixed income, and another option is InvIT. Yes, it's a sort of different diversification for the equity, for the fundraising guy, But yes, it is an investor accretive thing. That's why it has come to the market. Structure wise, nothing is different. Only one thing is different, that they have a project manager also, because road has to be taken care on a daily basis. That's the only difference that's happening in structure wise as well. Yes, there are private REITs as well. There are apart from public REITs, whereas REITs are only allowed to come in the public in the market, there can be a private REIT. This is Geo, by the way, huh? So that's the way that's the way they are working.
So
Same,
private listed REIT we can't buy, right?
no one can buy. Oh, so it's totally sold to banks or mutual fund guys.
Institutional only.
Institutional, totally institutional. It's done deal, sort of NCDs only, right?
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Tax distribution structure, nothing goes different. It's totally same way we took about REITs. Ticket size also same, but yes, their under construction properties cannot be more than 10% also. There is ad hoc limit on that particular also, because infra happens to be a riskier asset as compared to office spaces. Office spaces is just land, right? It's office space is just a land and building, whereas road is like multiple components involved in that particular thing.
Yeah.
So as far as REITs are compared, they had 50,000 as their minimum investment as of now, in which started with 10 lakhs, where as compared to 2 lakh 20 for REITs. From 10 lakh they came to 1 lakh. Now 1 lakh they are going to 1 unit, and they all are trading in 100 rupees. So it's 1/3 of the REIT also in that particular sense. So similar things, they are able to generate fixed income. They are controlled by, they are too regulated as compared to the other products of real estate for that matter. Same as structure also, they're distributing same tax thing, nothing differs from that. Risk, yes, there is some risk involved, that you are not so confident about toll collections. You don't know what will be the toll collection, you know what will be the power consumption for that matter, you will be able to achieve a transmission charges or not for that. Obviously these are run by the government policies. So like IndiGrid happens to be the one of the most lucrative REITs in which as of now. So IndiGrid prices, so IndiGrid end customers are interstate governments. Now government can come with anytime any law, right? If government comes with a law, yes, they will be hampered. Yeah. So that they have an agreement, they have all documents done, but yes, they can get hampered with any sort of policy changes. That happens for anything in the world, right?
So I think the positive point with this, with IndiGrid and any kind of an asset where the backing is government, the positive thing is the backing is government. So
Absolutely.
you can be pretty sure, okay, they are not going to default. But the negative thing is that they are the, they can change the rules and then entire thing goes for a toss.
So basically, frankly, they are the karta dharta of that.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So they have minimal cost, but yes, a little inflation of the cost can happen for that. What is important is the concession period. And I'll explain this in this particular side, and we will be able to get the idea for that particular thing. So if you see, I've just classified the power transmission, the latest Power Grid and InvIT and IndiGrid with IRB. So I'll just take IRB first. So IRB listed it came at a 102 price.
Guys, this is the most interesting slide I can say for the entire presentation.
Yeah. So IRB went to 55 rupees. Now need to understand why they went to 55 rupees. Now basically they have around 8 to 10, 12 roads, toll roads. Now what's happening? The toll road period is getting closer and closer, and they're not able to get new properties into their particular InvIT. So since they are not able to get more properties and extend their compensate their concession, reducing compensation period, their NAV is suffering, their price is suffering. So their price is going down and NAV is computed by some valuer. So he is saying 104 as of now because he feels that is 104. But yes, market believes that since the concession period is getting less, then this should not be the price one should pay for that particular thing. But yeah, they are able to distribute. So if you see the total distribution they have done since May 17 till date, they have distributed 50 rupees as of now. And obviously the major component being an InvIT is interest. So some maximum portion of this is chargeable to tax as of now. But yes, they are looking 15% yield as of now at current prices. But the real part is their capital has been getting eroded. Whereas on the other side, IndiGrid recently did a new acquisition. I would say in the starting of COVID, they did a new acquisition. See, their NAV has risen from 100 to 132. And same way they are able to match their prices. And at this particular level also, they are able to generate 9 rupees. So they are distributing 12 rupees a year, and they have given their guidance in this particular presentation as well. In next coming year, they will give more 3% more at least. So they have distributed 12.40. They have said next year we will give 3% more in that particular sense. But yeah, they are giving at this particular price at 9%. That happens to be accretive. The new player coming to the market has not given anything because it just came 2 months back. But the guidance in the IPO presentation, what they did, they said that we will be able to distribute it around 11%. So that's why the share came at 100. It got listed on a premium, the first one to list on premium, frankly. It listed on premium, and in just 7 days it went to 330, just matching its current NAV, which they give in their prices. So at this particular level, they were able to give 11%, let's suppose. So now they will be somewhere around 10 or 9 point something percentage, whereas REITs are at 7%. So the biggest difference is the total difference. The biggest piece is, and obviously the investor who is investing is looking कि पैसा कहाँ बनेगा. Obviously, InvITs में पैसा ज़्यादा बनेगा.
So that actually I was about to say the same thing. So a lot of people when ask me that, okay, abhi fixed income instrument mein, where should I put the money? Because FDs are gone down to 5-6%, liquid funds are giving you 3-4%, even ultra short, these all funds are giving you 4-5%. So if you can take a little bit of a higher risk, InvITs are basically, very interesting instruments because risk is there anyways. We explained that what kind of risk IndiGrid and Power Grid hold. But that risk is not as high as probably an IRB. I am not asking you to put money into IRB as of now. Probably Minal will agree to it. But a lot of people, a lot of my clients back at Edelweiss and elsewhere, my friends and all, I had suggested to get into IndiGrid when it was somewhere around 1995. That was a very interesting times when KKR also invested into it. And I think it fell down to 85 when KKR came in. The news actually was taken in so positively that it started rising. Now, when they are saying that we are going to distribute 12 rupees anyways, so 12 upon 95 comes out to be somewhere around 12.5% yield pre-tax anyways. That's only the fixed yield which you are getting. And then there will always be, there's an expectation that the unit price will also rise. So if you see, that was somewhere in 2019, mid of 2019, the investors have actually gotten 12%, 12.5%, 13% of the yields year on year, and then the share price has also risen from 95 to 133, which is somewhere again 35 to 40%. So this has been one of the best instruments in the last 2 years, safe yet. And now if you ask me that, okay, now what? I did not get it. Abhi lena hai ki nahi lena hai? So at 133 rupees, if someone is guiding 12.4 or let's say 13 rupees, comes out to be somewhere around 9.5% yield, right? Now 9.5% yield, even in today's environment when FDs are at 5 or 6% pre-tax, I think it's lucrative.
Yeah.
And the expectation of the share price, the unit price to go up further is always there, but it can go further below also. That's the risk which you probably are taking. Now it's an equity risk which you have to keep in mind. But then you need to compare as to what kind of returns you are getting from the safer instruments like the liquid funds and FDs, and then accordingly take a call.
But to add to Weber, what worst can happen? So the worst is IRB. Let's say the worst is IRB. It came at 102. If you add 55 plus 49, it's 105. So this is so the worst is not something to.
So what 55 plus 45? Why did you
55
do that?
is current price plus 50 rupees they have distributed till.
Okay, they've already distributed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you add obviously the inflation beats up all the things, but yeah, you are able to your capital is not eroded as of now.
Yeah, you have not lost anything like an equity, like a DHFL or
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, something which Power Grid investors can learn from InvIT is the 9 is the benchmark. So that can be a benchmark. A capital appreciation can be benchmark, and obviously that it is backed by Power Grid, and Power Grid happens to be one of the largest players in their particular field. Yeah, so they are very good players in that particular sense, and obviously they are PSU.
No doubt. So I think that is it. Okay.
Just one last slide, and I think this is the only slide.
Yeah, sure.
Very simple. I think no brainer is this particular slide. How REITs? What are REIT business? REITs is typically office spaces, warehouses, data centers, retail, industrial, and healthcare. Whereas InvITs are just highways, power distribution, telecom sectors, and all those. Revenue stability. Yes, they have long-term lease contracts. That's where they have the steady. Their contracts are much higher, but yes, dependent on various capacity utilization of the vehicles, like toll collection. it's totally dependent. It's totally not knowable to anyone, right? Yeah, both are AAA rated assets, so that's not a difference in that particular sense. For regulation risk, yeah, roads can be taken. So state authorities, regulators, and many other authorities are more involved in the infra sets, whereas as compared to a land and building, it's typical a land or a building that's coming. Visibility of growth, it's same for both the things. It's just you have to acquire new assets, or you have to redevelop your premises in case of REITs. So like these guys, the REITs which have the building from last 10 years, the buildings are 10 years old. Now the building was around 10 years back, the building was allowed to build 8 floors. Now they can build that building up for 24 floors. So on a same particular land, not investing extra money for land, they can develop a higher building and get a new rent and a higher rent, because the rents are high as of now. So that is a redevelopment NAV accretion. And that's it from me.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Mrinal. I have been answering a lot of questions which are coming in. So by having these two people, kind of taking the session, I think we have cut down a lot of time, because I used to read all the questions. But there are some questions where I need your input, bro. So I'll read it out, and whatever is not answered, and probably if you can just help us, right? So one question is how infra company decides whether they should go for an InvIT or IPO. And same question someone asked for the REIT. So what is the incentive for them? So if I ask you that as a DLF or as an unlisted real estate developer, if I want to decide that whether I should do a proper IPO, an equity IPO, or I should go for a REIT. So what should be my advantages and disadvantages across both the classes?
Since you quoted DLF, let's suppose DLF Cyber City Gurgaon gets listed tomorrow, right? DLF is the owner. They will get rent. The rent they are getting, they have to pay taxes. In REIT, they don't have to pay taxes. Rent is tax free. The simplest example to explain.
Correct.
Second is the way the ROFO and the other regulations flow. REIT is regulations wise much more complex, but much more easy to be adopted by SEBI and the regulators. So there are compliances, but the government is more keen towards expanding this particular market. Third thing, credit rating agencies are more favorable to rate a REIT rather than a mainstream IPO.
Okay, great. Got it. So that would answer, Anurag, your question. Shrutal is asking if any asset is sold, that amount received will be distributed, and what is its treatment? So yeah, if out of those 12 properties, one is sold, what
they have to deploy that particular amount in 1 year. If they are not able, they have to distribute 90%.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So that's interesting. Okay, all right, thanks. Shiva is asking, would InvIT be much volatile than REIT in NAV price, considering the road accidents, infra issues, etc.? If NAV,
I think it's totally NAV sum game, no? So anything can happen. Tomorrow, we don't know the logistics space boost up. The road minister come and say, no, I want to increase roads toll by 15%. Anything can happen. That's the positive side I've told you. Negative side you have already taken care of.
Okay, thanks. Shraddha is asking, for infra, there is an option of IDF as well. Then why would you go for InvIT? What is IDF? Infrastructure, NIIF or something.
But so that's the coupon bearing, right? And it's different between.
It's a different instrument
right?
also.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do a comparative study just like we did for an IPO or a REIT with an InvIT or an IDF. Neha is asking, not okay. She's answering someone. Okay, Anurag is asking, is infra there is a certain maintenance liability too? If that happens, is it on a contingent basis, keeping provisions and then distributing the remaining amount? So basically, I just also wanted to just check. I answered to someone. So this 90% is on a net cash flow basis, right?
Yeah. So this is NDCF. There is a calculation of NDCF, which has been termed net distribution cash flows. So, but they are able to distribute 95 or 98% of their rent, total revenue collection rather.
Got it. Okay. And finally, last question is, then why companies come up with IPO? Because their business is not that scalable, like GR Infra coming with an IPO.
Where were you to answer this?
See, I need to study GR Infra projects, what is happening over there, but because I only study the companies after they are done with their IPOs. I never do pre-IPO analysis.
It's similar like why startup guys come with a VC funding and all those things, right? They want to scale, and obviously they want to scale. They want to add more assets to their portfolio.
Guys, it's not like that. Mrinal said positive things about InvIT and REIT, that there are no positive things about IPOs. InvIT and REIT says it's like a lot of regulatory challenges are there. First of all, it takes a lot of time to come up with a. That is why even in so many years we only have 3 REITs, right? See,
so the difference is just I want to interrupt. The difference is regulators are not able to make things successful for a REIT guy to come in or an InvIT guy. They have imposed so many, there are so many approvals. So if you have heard of, you can give the dates also. 30th September was the date when DRHP was filed for Embassy, and they came in with an IPO after exactly 6 months, right? Correct. So they took 6 months. They have to revise that particular document 2 times. Mindspace had to revise the documents 3 times. So why? Because there were so many changes suggested from these guys, from the regulators, that they don't want to destroy the reputation with the traditional real estate we are working with.
Got it. How is the NAV calculated for InvIT?
Same, it's just total valuation divided by number of shares. That's it.
Got it.
I think the corruption thing, Ronak, I think it's very clear.
I don't want to answer this over there. It's okay. Ronak, I'll take it offline. Shubham is also asking, this is one thing which was left. You told that Embassy REIT you prefer, just wanted to know the rationale behind it. Would you give some rationale, Mrinal, and I'll top it later if you have something. I mean, I don't know whether that is your preference or not. If not, then probably I can just pitch in.
No, I'm very neutral on Mindspace. Mindspace, so thoda wo emotional.
Emotional bias bhi hai na Mindspace. Yeah.
It's not about Mindspace. Obviously, Mindspace is not looking good as of now when we compared the numbers. But yeah, so as of now, the occupancy levels are good. Obviously. Occupancy levels are good,
and I think that the concentration risk is also not high. I mean, it's the least in Embassy. Occupancy levels are good. Whale is high, what I remember. And see, basically, Mumbai and Bangalore is where their majority assets are. And I think for the office kind of a thing, Mumbai and Bangalore, nobody can beat that. If I'm right on the geographical allocation for Embassy vis-a-vis the other ones.
Frankly speaking, the more the conversation we have with people, the geography keeps changing. Somewhere, so the day Panchil will come, everyone with the Pune is the best market, right? The Salarpuria will come, everyone is
जब वो आएगा तब maybe मैं Embassy छोड़ के उधर चला जाऊंगा. So as a final retail investor, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? Sell something, get into other one.
The biggest and the good advantage is they are paying on quarterly basis, and we don't.
Others are not, yeah. Others are on semi-annual.
No. Everyone is paying on quarterly basis.
Yeah.
So if you compare with different instruments, for that matter, FD for that matter.
So I think that's not the question. I think that should not be the question. If someone asks me if I should invest in FD versus REIT, I'm pretty clear. Yaar,
I was just going to that question.
That's not. So I think last one is, what's your future perspective for REITs assuming work from home? Exactly. So this is one which we needed to discuss. Guys, see, it's a for the last 1 year, this has been a question in everybody's mind, and this is the reason where we have seen such a price correction in all the listed REITs, right? I don't know when it started falling down from 500 plus levels, Embassy REIT, and it went down to 315, 310, which is very close to its IPO price in March 2019. The idea of that, okay, abhi kya hoga? So what happens is, first of all these tenants are high quality tenants, what I believe. MNC tenants, they are not going to just say कि यार अभी तो कोई ऑफिस ही नहीं आ रहा, अब हम आगे रेंट ही नहीं देंगे. Yes, there is a provision कि they can go for a rent renegotiation as well, but till now what I know is it hasn't happened. And if it hasn't happened in the last 15 months, Mrinal, if it has happened, let me know. But
so $1 per square feet, no one matters.
No, it doesn't matter to those guys. Exactly.
But what matters is the escalation thing. So they are able to defer some sort of escalation. Frankly,
so that is why I wouldn't
have very minuscule for them.
Exactly, and that is why I wouldn't have asked anybody to invest in Embassy REIT at 400, 420, 430. But I definitely wanted. I mean, at 300, 310 rupees, it was a no-brainer. I did not see it falling below its IPO price. So obviously, in these kind of situation, you need to time your entries as well, right? अभी क्या है कि 310 पे, even if they continue to give you value wise, what is their distribution, Mrinal, Embassy? It's 7% somewhere comes at what, 335, which is currently trading at 340. So 310, 320 pe, you are getting an 8% kind of a yield. And when you buy it, you have locked in that kind of 8%. It's not going to keep going up and down, right? So 8% pre-tax today was pretty good. Now, if it goes to 360, 370, and you ask me, ab kare kya, so I would say, wait a bit. Now, work from home issue will, mere hisab se, it will get sorted. If you start reading, companies are actually calling people, although they will have some higher distance between the two people. So if 100 people are there in the office, let's say 30 people won't be required to come in. Only
Absolutely.
70 people are coming in. But for those 70 people, they are not going to sit that close, which pre-COVID they used to sit. तो मुझे लगता है कि space तो उतना ही use होना है.
So Vaibhav, just to add to this particular point, there was a concept of de-densification. So
Right.
before 2000, there was कि 100 square feet में एक बंदे को बैठाया करते थे, है ना? Now pre-COVID levels, it moved to 60, 70 square feet. Now this will again come, and we all know that in India, grade A supply is very limited. And now, because we have started the discussion, to quote numbers, 1.6 million skilled IT workable staff is getting ready every year. कहीं तो बैठाना पड़ेगा, कुछ को तो जॉब मिलेगी, कहीं को तो बैठाना पड़ेगा ना. So we don't have so much, and the way the investments and these companies are coming in India, they will only prefer grade A assets. They have to go for that model. And I think JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley, the CEOs of these companies have totally made it very clear. Once everyone gets vaccinated, everyone has to be back to the office. So the bigger players in US have already decided that they want their staff to back to be in office. Yes, hybrid model is here to stay. And we all agree that hybrid model will stay. Startup guys will go. And frankly, their tenants are not startup guys. Their tenants are only Fortune 500.
WeWork has startup guys, and WeWork, we know what has happened to WeWork.
And by the way, just a fact, WeWork India is owned by Embassy.
Right. Correct.
So you never know, they will come with a REIT or what.
Abhi to WeWork IPO REIT, everything is like out of our toss. But okay, I mean, I think that is it. Mrinal, thanks a lot. I hope people enjoyed this conversation. And you dealt all the questions. I mean, I was also answering the question, and later on, all the technical questions I threw to you because you are the expert.
So,
and
I'm available on Twitter and LinkedIn. I just you can just DM me or ping me on both any of the platforms. I'm always available there, and I keep writing and updating about REITs also.
And guys, I'll tell you, the whosoever is remaining, the 51 participants, how did I catch hold of Mrinal? I'll just tell you an interesting story. So you know about my Telegram group, right? We have around 2,500 people over there. So Mrinal posted something over there, and then he deleted it because he mistakenly posted about some Twitter kind of link where he had written about REITs. And because I'm an admin, I actually saw that, okay, someone has written such a marvelous piece and deleted it. And I thought, why not get him on to speak with you guys? Ultimately, I do the solo talking, but then this idea clicked in my mind. So from now, if this has been taken very good the feedback has been good, I think I should do this model quite often, that I call industry experts, whosoever is working in that field, because I can't know everything here. So there will always be some gap that probably I can, disseminate it to you.
Frankly, the presentation I showed you guys is just, I've just copied the tweets and pasted in the PPT and just showed to you guys.
Wonderful.
So it's just a tweet.
Wonderful. So anything, I just want to keep, bringing some new stuff for you guys. And this is what I continue in future as well. Thanks a lot on that note, Mrinal, and thanks everybody for attending it.
For having me. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.